So thank you everybody for attending the Introduction to High Content Analysis in FCS Express. The webinar today will be about 30 minutes and we will be showing off most of the new features of the high content analysis functionality in FCS Express. Before I begin, I do want to remind everybody that all of the webinars are actually going to be recorded and posted on our website. So if you do ever want to go see this webinar again or tell anybody where it is, at the bottom of our homepage is this section called Webinars. You can just click on that link and you see right away that you can go find our recorded webinars. Those are located obviously right over here. And then at any time you can click and go see our recorded webinars. The webinars are usually posted within 24 hours of the webinar being hosted. So by tomorrow, they should be up and running. Okay, another quick introduction. One of the main reasons that we did high content analysis was to support our new FCS Express for image cytometry product because a lot of imaging is done in 96 well plate format. So if anybody here didn't know, for FCS Express version 3, we only had a flow product. For FCS Express version 4, we have our flow product over here, and we also have a product for image cytometry analysis as well. And you can go, we do have a recorded webinar on that page I showed before, giving an introduction to the FCS Express for image cytometry. It shows a little bit about the heat maps as well, but not in as much detail as I'm going to show today. So what I do want to stress is everything that I'm going to show today about heat maps works basically identically for flow data and for image data. I'm going to focus mostly on flow today because I think most of the attendees here are have a flow cytometry background, but again I do want to stress that if you're using image-derived data from the IsoCyte instrument or from Cell Profiler or any of the other formats that we support, you will be able to do everything in the same way. So the first question is, what formats do we support for high content from the flow cytometry side? We support almost every flow cytometer that we found that has a high content device that you can use a 96 well plate or any other size plate reader with it. The BDHTS system, the Accuray C6 cytometer, the Guava instruments, the Eclipse from Sony, the Quanta from Coulter, I think I'm missing a few probably. From IntelliSite, sorry, we support their, if you have any of their, either their device or if you have any of their add-ons that they can add a 96 well plate reader to an existing flow cytometer, we can read those as well. So any device that basically has a high content or a plate reader attachment possible. If you do have an instrument that doesn't have the HyperCyte, that's what I was trying to remember the name of. If you have a HyperCyte, we can read that data as well. If you have an instrument that has a plate reader that we cannot seem to read the plates or that I haven't mentioned, please contact us. If it's any sort of standard flow cytometer that makes FCS files, we will add it to the formats that we are compatible with. Okay. Another question, what kind of plate sizes do we support? Basically every single plate size. From I think 8 well plate to a 1536 well plate, and we can support all of those. Okay. So without much further ado, let me show a little bit about how the 96 well plate or the plate formats work in FCS Express. Again, I'm going to show most of this data with 96 well plates, but in reality, as I said, it could be any size plate is possible. Okay, and so like anything else in FCS Express, I am going to go to the Insert menu and insert something on the page. In this case, the trick is the heat maps. Okay. One other thing that I should mention before I get started, I apologize, the heat maps does not come with the basic FCS Express. It is an add-on function that is required. If you go to our prices page and you go to either the flow cytometry page or the image cytometry page, you can find the pricing for the high content analysis add-on. I think you'll find that the functionality we show here is, or showcase here, is very unique. Doesn't exist in any other flow package on the market today, and if you are going to be doing serious high content flow, there are a lot of advantages for you. Okay, so yes, so it is an extra add-on. It does come with the FCS Express demo. If you download the demo, the high content features are enabled, but you do have to purchase that extra. Okay, so like I was saying, the heat maps are on the insert menu over here, and you insert a heat map just like you would insert any other kind of plot. At this moment, I'm just going to insert some demo data. It's nothing very exciting. This is actually from a Accuray cytometer given to us by the Accuray folks just to play around with. And these are just some beads. So I'm going to show them kind of because I don't want anyone to get carried away with what the actual experiment is all about. I want to focus on the functionality of the heat maps as such. Okay, so what it is doing is it's loading up all 96 wells, and you can see that a heat map appears. Okay, before I get into the details of the heat maps, I do want to stress that the heat maps work like any other plot in FCS Express. You can resize them any way you want. You can right-click and format. You can change the orientation from portrait to landscape. You can change the colors. I'll go into some of the formatting features in more detail. You can copy them. You can paste them. Anything that you can do with the regular FCS Express, you can do to heat maps, including, of course, having multiple heat maps on a page. So I have 2 heat maps here, and I'll go into detail again what you can do, but right now, one heat map will be showing forward scatter, and one heat map will be showing FL1. Okay? So you can have heat maps from different parameters. You can have heat maps showing different data files. The heat maps can be gated in any way you want. I'll demonstrate that later. And of course, anything that you can do with FCS Express, the regular version that you're used to, you can do with heat maps, including batch processing. I can actually save this layout as a PowerPoint presentation. And I'll open it after I'm done. And you'll see that the PowerPoint presentation has the heat maps that look exactly like your analysis in FCS Express. Okay, so you can create PowerPoints with the click of a button. So all of this stuff, I'm not going to go into it. This is far from an introduction into FCS Express, but if you do know how to use FCS Express or you watch the introduction, anything that you can do with the basic software, we've adapted that to heat maps as well. Okay? So what can you do with the heat maps? Well, the first thing to stress is that you can actually plot any statistic on any parameter. So right now, as you can see on this particular analysis, right now I'm plotting the forward scatter parameter. Right now I'm plotting the FL1 parameter. Okay, and just like any other plot in FCS Express, you can just click and change to any other parameter that you like. Okay, so the question is, what statistic is this plotting? And you can also plot any statistic you like. So if I go to the format window, and I'll just move it out of the way so you can see the plot. If I go to the overlay, you can see that right now I'm showing the arithmetic mean over here of the forward scatter parameter on a well-by-well basis. So this color coding up on top here reflects the forward scatter mean for that well on a well-by-well basis across the plate. Okay, so and you can see that if I drop down, I can actually show any single statistic that I can possibly calculate, that FCS Express can calculate. You can pick any one. So if I wanted to show the number of events in each well, I could now show the number of events, just hit preview, and now you can see that the wells in the middle actually have a lower number of events. I'll explain this coloring scheme in a moment. There's a red well that has a lot more events than normal, and most of the black ones, those have an average number. They're all very similar to each other. Okay, but if I wanted to plot the FL4 median, okay, I could plot the FL4 median, as you can see, and hit preview, and now I'm showing the FL4 median on a well-by-well basis. So as you can see, it's very, very easy to plot any statistic you like. Very, very easy to plot any channel that you want. Okay? So if there are any questions on that, please type that into the question and answer section. And again, just to stress that one of the beauties of the software is that you can have multiple heat maps, each heat map showing a different parameter or a different statistic so that you can really, really easily compare one heat map to another. Okay? So let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about the different coloring schemes that are available. And you can change the coloring schemes, you can see by going to the color levels over here on the format screen. We support very, very many coloring schemes. Okay, so what you can do is, and I'll explain some of the ones we have. A very popular one in high content is what we call this mean plus or minus standard deviation. What that means is if the particular well has the mean value of the particular statistic that you're graphing, that well will be black. Okay? If that particular well is a certain number of standard deviations above the statistic that you're plotting, it will be red. And if the value in that well is a certain number of standard deviations below the average value for that statistic, it will be green. And the number of standard deviations is totally customizable. Right now I'm setting it up for 3.5 standard deviations. So if we take this to the practical matter, let's look at what we're actually plotting here. We're plotting the number of events in every single well. Okay, you can see that by seeing that we're plotting the number of events. So if we look back at the color levels in light of that, black wells have the average number of events per well of all of the wells on the plate. And then red is that well has 3.5 standard deviations. The number of events in that well is 3.5 standard deviations above the average number of events in all of the wells on that plot. And the green wells mean that those wells have 3.5 standard deviations. The number of events in those wells are 3.5 standard deviations below the average of all of the events in the wells. Okay? So this is a way where the wells that are pretty much the average value that you're looking at, those become black, and wells that are above and below the average value are red or green. And you can change, actually we have a very similar one. Instead of going from green to red, we can go from green to blue. That's also a very popular one. We have a more traditional one, rainbow. Rainbow just doesn't calculate the average. It's just basically wells that are have a low events are red. Wells that have an average number of events, or as the low values are red and the high values are purple. Okay, and it just scales from red to purple. We also have a grayscale. Again, low numbers of events are black, high numbers of events are white. And you can also have an inverse grayscale where low numbers of events are white and high numbers of events are black. Okay, so a lot of different flexibilities. You can also scale the levels, the colors for the levels linearly or logarithmically. So if you're going, an example will be easy to see on the rainbow color palette. That means in order to transfer from red to yellow, to purple, each level is logarithmically spaced above the next level. Okay, so I don't know, it really depends on the range of the data, but the yellow will be kind of a logarithmically above the orange, which will be logarithmically above the red. So it's the same as any other logarithm. If you've got a very high dynamic range of data with a lot of very high data, a lot of very low data, you may want to space the levels logarithmically. Okay? So again, a ton of choices for the coloring, so you can really get out what you want. Okay, so again, you can also on the options orient the plate, landscape, or portrait, like I said, just by right-clicking and see what have it set up the way that you want. One other thing, I don't have an example. I don't have an example of it right now, but if your well actually doesn't have all of the data in every single well of your plate, then those wells will just disappear from your plate. There'll just be a blank area in there. So we actually only create circles if there's at least one event in that particular well. So one of the other neat things about FCS Express is you can actually see the actual values that are being plotted. So if you want to see what are the actual values that these colors represent, you can actually insert a text box and right-click and insert a heat map stats grid. Okay, and you see that there's two possible heat maps. So I'm going to choose which one I want. And when I click that, FCS Express builds a table in your text box, and the table contains tokens, and the tokens show all of the values that are in your 96 well plate. Okay, so you can see here that this was the high well, the number of let's go back to plot the number of events. Overlays, number of events. So let's look at some of the interesting wells. We can see that well G7 seems to have a lot of events. So let's look back to G7 over here, and we can see that G7 has 11,000 events. Okay, and it seems like D7, that doesn't have many events at all. So if we go here to D7, you can see that that one has 329 events. Okay, so you can see the raw data, you can see the raw data, and you can look, and as you change the parameter on the plot, the raw data updates to change automatically, reflecting what's actually being plotted. So if I go to the format here and I change it to the median, you can see that not only does my heat map update, but my stats grid updates as well, now showing the medians because that's what's being populated at this moment. Okay. Once again, how to insert, just go to how to insert the stats grid, just right-click anywhere in a text box and go to Insert Heat Map Stats Grid and choose which heat map you want to insert. Okay. And of course, these are just tokens. As you can see, they're gray. I won't go very much into the token system in FCS Express. I'm going to presume you know how it works in basics. But if you want to just insert an individual one, you can insert a token and you can insert a statistic. And if you pick one of the heat maps, you can actually choose just which well you want to show the statistic for, well A5, for instance, and it will now give you the token for the value that's currently being plotted in A5. So just like with FCS Express tokens, you can use this token inside a custom token to create your own statistics, to calculate a fluorescence shift, or to calculate a ratio, or whatever. You can put this statistic in a text box that's on another page. You can do anything you want that you can with the token system in FCS Express with these heat map tokens. Okay? So any questions on that so far? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about gating. Gating is very straightforward in FCS Express. We tried to incorporate it as just like any other gates. So let's put a dot plot of this data. And this is forward scatter versus side scatter. And what I want to stress is that this is actually showing all of the data in all 96 wells at the moment. Okay, because this dot plot is ungated. It's not gated on a particular well. It's showing all of the data from the well. So I'm going to show you first how to create a gate on a dot plot and use it on a 96 well plate. And I'm going to then show you how to create a gate on a 96 well plate and use it on a dot plot. Again, when the All of this can be used. There was a question about batch processing. Everything I show here can be used in batch processing. The tokens and the statistics and everything update as the data on your plots change, just like normal batch processing in FCS Express. We will have a webinar on batch processing coming up shortly. It's not been scheduled yet, but the heat maps, if you have ever done batch processing in FCS Express, the heat maps work exactly the same way as any other plot. Okay? So with regards to the gating, if I make a gate on my dot plot like normal, let's say I want these events over here, and I call this my high side scatter gate. Well, in FCS Express, if you wanted to apply this high side scatter gate to another histogram, you would just simply go to the histogram, go to the gating tab, and apply the high side scatter gate by dropping it down. Or in FCS Express 4, I could actually just click on this high side scatter gate and drag it onto my histogram. Now you can see that the gate has been applied. Well, you apply the gate to a heat map in exactly the same way. So if I were to take this gate and just drop it on my heat map, okay, I have now applied the gate to the heat map. So now this heat map is showing the, I think, arithmetic mean of FL1 on a well-by-well basis only for the cells that are in my high side scatter gate. Okay, and as I move my high side scatter gate around, you'll see that the heat map, the histogram, and the heat map update in real time to reflect the new statistics of the well, of the gated population. Okay, I won't go into it. I mean, that's really all there is to it. You can see, if you look over here to see what the current gate is, you can see that right now it says no gate because my dot plot is selected and my dot plot is ungated. But if I click on my heat map, you can see that the heat map says that the high side scatter gate has been applied. Okay, and that's it. It works exactly the same as any other gating in FCS Express of any other plot. And you can go to the format screen and you can see in the overlays as well, you can change the gate just like any other plot in FCS Express. It shows the current gate that's applied. Okay, so applying gates works exactly the same way as anything else in FCS Express, as applying gates on anything else. So not only can you apply gates to a heat map, you can actually create gates on a heat map. And again, you create gates on a heat map in the exact same way you create a gate on a plot in FCS Express. You choose the gate up here that you want to create, and you just start drawing it on the plot. So it works the same way for heat maps. For heat maps, you have to create a well gate, as we call them, and you can, let's say at first, create a, say I want to gate on these 3 wells, and I'm going to call this my wells. Okay, and you can see that those are now highlighted. Once a gate is created, you can add or remove wells to them one by one. So if I want to add these 2 wells to my gate and this well to my gate, I just hold down Control and click on the wells, and they get added or removed as you click on them. If I hold down Shift and select the whole group, that replaces it, but if I hold down Control, it actually adds that whole group at the same time. So standard Windows selection things where you can add and remove gates to a well. When I'm done, I can either click away from the heat map or press the close button. And now what I can do is I can actually apply that gate to any plot that I want. So if I apply the My Wells gate to the plot, you can see that the plot is now showing only the events that you selected in the wells of interest. Okay? This can be very, very useful if you want to quickly scroll through one well at a time. You can very easily create a gate. Let's create a gate, a well gate. I can also create a gate by right-clicking on the plot, on the heat map, selecting Create Gate, and then going to Well over here. And I'm just going to pick a single well, and I'm going to call this my single well gate. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my single well gate to both of these plots by multi-selecting the plots and then dropping down the single well gate. You can see the plots all changed to only show that single well. And then as I go through, I can go back and edit the gate, and I'm going to edit my single well gate. And you see that the blue highlighted comes up to show what's in that gate. And you can see that as I click on another gate to edit it, that my histogram and dot plots update. Now the data in the wells look very, very similar to each other, but if you look at the count on the histogram, it's now 1423, it's now 1349, it's now 102. So you can see that, and you can see that there's more or less events on the dot plot as well. So this is not dramatically different data, unfortunately, but I think you get the point that while I'm editing a gate on the heat map, if plots are gated on that gate, they will automatically update to reflect what's going on, to reflect the new gated population. Okay, and of course I could call, even though this is called single well, that's only a name, I can add as many wells to that particular gate as I like. And then as I add the wells, you can see that there are more dots appearing on the dot plot, and the histogram peak is getting higher because there are more cells, more wells included in my gate. Okay, so I can create gates on a heat map and then apply them to any kind of plot in FCS Express, no problem at all. Okay, so that's the basic functionality of the heat maps. Once again, we're compatible with a lot of different heat maps from different cytometers. We are compatible with imaging cytometers as well. You can work the same way. You can create gates on your heat map. You can apply gates from another plot to your heat maps. The gates that you create on heat maps can be applied in a gating hierarchy in a very similar way, not even very similar, in an identical way that any other gates. So you can include heat map gates with polygon gates and any other kind of gates in a standard gating hierarchy. That's no problem at all. And what I'm doing right now is loading up a layout just to show you a kind of more complicated example of using heat maps. Oops, this one can be closed. Hang on a second. When the GoToWebinar is working, often my computer slows down for whatever reason. Okay. So here is an example of a more elaborate layout, and I won't go into all of the details of this particular analysis, but just to show it's got a lot of the elements that we are talking about. You can see the table that's showing the median GFP value from this particular heat map over here. And these plots are actually gated. The blue histogram is gated on the positive well, what we have a positive gate, or what we call an experimental, and the green is gated is the negative controls. Okay, so you can set up your analysis like this, and what you can do, again, just to show the example, is that if I go to edit a gate and I edit my experimental gate, you can see my experimental gate is highlighted in purple. I don't know if you can see it clearly. It's right up here. Okay, and you can see that once I edit my experimental gate and click on another well and say that that well is my experimental gate, you should be able to see momentarily that the histogram, you can see that the histogram updated over here so that the blue histogram is on top of the green histogram. So this blue histogram was actually gated on the gate, whatever, on this particular gate, whatever this was showing. Okay. One thing that I do want to stress also for people doing high content analysis is that Z prime is often a very important factor. And you can, FCS Express has a special token to calculate the Z prime factor. of your experiment. So if you create a gate on your negative control wells and you create a gate on your positive control wells, you can then create a custom token. I won't go into how to do that right now. That'll be for another webinar, but you can create a custom token very easily that will calculate the Z prime factor based on your negative control and your positive control where you define what they are. Okay, and we actually have some tutorials about this. I should stress, if you go to the application button and go to help and then tutorials, we do have a tutorial about using heat maps, and that tutorial does go through creating a Z-prime statistic step by step. Okay. So that's basically a summary of the heat map functionality. Once again, there's a ton of power in there. You can create as many heat maps as you like on different plates from different parameters, from different statistics, and put them side by side or on different pages or whatever you like. You can apply gates to the heat maps. You can create gates on the heat maps and apply them elsewhere. You can automatically have tables created showing the actual statistical values of your heat maps. The gates, as you move your heat map gates, your well gates around, all of the data links to it updates automatically. So basically anything that you would really need to do with a plate-based analysis, you can do it in FCS Express, and again, in a very familiar Microsoft PowerPoint type environment with all of our batch processing, compensation, you name it, it all applies to heat maps. One thing I do want to stress that we did go the extra mile, and if every single well has a different compensation for whatever reason, which can happen, we actually apply the correct compensation to each individual well. So it's not like all of the wells, all of the FCS files in the well have to have the same compensation. Each well can have its own compensation that is defined in the FCS file. Okay. So if there are any questions, there's one, please feel free to type them into the question and answer section. There is a question was asked that I think would be useful. What is a typical use case? One thing that you can certainly do is if you have isotype controls, you can actually create a gate on a 2D plot based on your isotype controls, for instance, and apply that gate to your heat map. So you can see then the distribution across all the wells of whatever statistic based on your isotype control gate, and then you can have another gate based on your positives, and you can compare that. Another question is, can we analyze Luminex data files? We haven't gotten an example of them yet, but if somebody wants to send us an example of a data set from the Luminex, we can certainly read them. That should be no problem. Are there any other questions? Yeah, if anybody does want to send us some data, please just get in touch at support@denovosoftware.com, or actually if anyone has any questions at all, please get in touch at support@denovosoftware.com. We do have an FTP site that we can give you to upload a plate's worth of data. Let me make that bigger so you can see. So we do have an FTP site. You can upload them, and feel free at any time to ask any questions. It's no problem. All right, thank you very much for attending. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'll answer any other questions in just a moment.